They told me, "This table is for family." Then shoved a $2,200 bill in front of me. But what happened next? Nobody at that restaurant was ready for it. I was halfway through a glass of Tempranillo in my loft when my phone lit up with a name I didn't expect to see: Mom. We hadn't spoken beyond obligatory birthday texts and strained holiday calls in months, and even then, I could almost hear the silence of the words she left unsaid. Her voice came through the speaker, sweet, trembling, rehearsed. "Rachel, sweetheart, we're having dinner at Aurelia House tomorrow night. Everyone will be there. We'd love it if you came." Aurelia House, the rooftop restaurant with a skyline view that screamed excess. Not her usual choice for family gatherings. My instinct told me to decline. My better judgment screamed that walking into that place would be walking into a trap. Yet I felt something catch in my chest. The word everyone lingered like bait. I told her I'd think about it and ended the call, but the decision followed me to bed, into my dreams, and right into the next morning. By lunch, curiosity and some half-dead hope won. I texted back one word: fine. The following evening, I stood at the entrance of Aurelia House with my hand tightening around a leather clutch. The lobby smelled of polished wood, expensive wine, and fresh roses. Crystal chandeliers spilled golden light over marble floors, catching in my hair and bouncing off the mirrored walls. Through the dining room glass, I saw them. My mother, draped in a ruby pendant my late father had given her. My cousin Adrian with his cocky smile and Rolex flashing like a lighthouse. Serena, his wife, all diamonds and sharp perfume. Their laughter rose like champagne bubbles, each one bursting before it could reach me. The maitre d' glanced up from his ledger, smiling. "Name, miss." But before I could answer, Mom's voice floated through the air. "Oh, there she is finally." A dozen faces turned toward me. I stepped forward, the click of my heels against marble too loud, too telling. My black dress whispered quiet confidence, but my heart pounded like a drum I couldn't control. They'd taken the best table in the house, of course, overlooking the skyline. The city lights sparkled like jewelry scattered across black velvet. I approached and froze. There was no chair for me. Adrian leaned back, one arm draped lazily across his seat, the other nursing a glass of bourbon. His smirk curled before the words came. "This table's for family." The couple at the next table stopped mid-conversation. Serena gave a tinkling laugh, leaning close to him as if to soften the jab. "Don't be cruel, Adrian. She knows you're joking." But he wasn't. We all knew it. I dragged a chair from a nearby table, the scrape of wood against marble cutting through the restaurant's soft piano notes. Mom didn't meet my eyes. She smoothed her napkin, pretending it had wrinkles to tame. "You're late," she said. "I'm 15 minutes early," I replied. The conversation washed over me like waves I wasn't meant to catch. Exotic vacations, impossible purchases, casual mentions of champagne-fueled weekends in Aspen. My words, when I dared let them out, were drowned beneath Adrian's louder voice. I thought of my company, the contracts signed just this week, the people back at the office who had stayed past midnight with me building a dream that once lived only in my head. A text from Diane, my partner, had buzzed minutes before I walked in. "We landed Singapore. Tonight's a celebration." I sat with them instead. For a while I listened, observed, waited, but something prickled at the base of my neck. This wasn't a family dinner. It was theater. They were actors, and I'd been dragged in as the unwilling audience. When the waiter arrived, Adrian's voice boomed with exaggerated generosity. "I'm splurging tonight. Wagyu ribeye, and let's uncork the Bordeaux 15. Serena chimed in. "Lobster for me and champagne. It's a special night." My mother nodded approvingly, her pendant catching the candlelight. "Yes, let's treat ourselves." Their orders stacked one atop another like bricks building a wall around me. My untouched water glass sweated in my hand. And beneath the chatter, a slow dawning realization spread through me like ice water. This wasn't a reunion. This was a setup. The night stretched on, and I couldn't shake the awareness that someone was watching me. At the bar near the corner of the room, a man sat alone, nursing a glass of red. Tall, broad shoulders, dark hair, and an intensity in his gaze that cut straight through the haze of wine and laughter. He wasn't part of our group, yet every time I glanced up, his eyes were there. I told myself I imagined the way his lips curved when Adrian raised his voice. I told myself it was coincidence when our eyes locked just as Serena's hand brushed Adrian's thigh under the table. But when I shifted in my chair, heat pooled low in my stomach. I hated that it thrilled me. I hated that, sitting there ignored and dismissed, the one thing grounding me wasn't family, but the look of a stranger across the room. By the time dessert menus arrived, I already knew how the evening would end. I wasn't there to be celebrated. I wasn't even there to be seen. I was there to pay. And somehow, knowing it didn't make the trap any less suffocating. The waiter slid a fresh glass of wine in front of me, but I hardly noticed. My focus was fixed on the table, on what wasn't there. No chair had been placed for me, not at the beginning, not by accident. This was deliberate. Maybe I should have taken the hint, I murmured, dragging the chair from another table again. The legs scraping across marble with a defiance I couldn't quite suppress. Heads turned. Conversations paused. My cousin Adrian smirked wider, pleased by the scene he had orchestrated. "Don't be so dramatic," Serena purred, her manicured fingers tapping against the rim of her champagne flute. "We didn't know you were really coming. You're always so unpredictable." Unpredictable. Their word for unwelcome. I sat anyway, spine straight, fingers curling lightly around the stem of my water glass. If they expected me to shrink, to apologize, they'd be waiting all night. Mom cleared her throat, her eyes flicking nervously between Adrian and me. "Let's not spoil things. We're finally together, all of us." I nearly laughed. Together? I had walked into a private performance staged for my humiliation. The food, the wine, the perfect view of the skyline, it was theater, and I was the unwilling extra. Adrian's Rolex caught the light as he gestured wildly through some story about a client. Serena chimed in with anecdotes about spa weekends, imported handbags, and a villa in Capri that practically paid for itself through rental income. Each tale grew taller, each laugh sharper. They weren't catching me up on their lives. They were reminding me, in carefully chosen words, that I didn't belong at this table. A sudden flash of memory stabbed at me. Christmas 4 years ago. I'd called home from my tiny apartment, still decorated with the plastic tree I'd rescued from a thrift shop. I could hear laughter in the background, the clink of glasses, the unmistakable sound of a party. "Oh, just a small gathering," Mom had said, her voice syrupy and hurried. "Nothing formal." I hadn't been invited. Again. I shook the thought away, blinking back to the present. Tonight wasn't about nostalgia. It was about survival. The waiter returned with another bottle of wine. Adrian leaned back, spreading himself across his chair like a king on a throne. "Life's too short for mediocrity," he announced, nodding at the label before the cork popped. Serena lifted her glass toward me. "You of all people should know, Rachel. Success means living boldly." The words dripped with irony. Success. They dismissed mine until it became useful to them. And now, sitting under the restaurant's golden chandeliers, I finally understood. Tonight was about utility. They had no interest in reconciliation. They wanted something. It was then that I felt it again, the weight of eyes on me. I glanced toward the bar. He was still there, the stranger. Tall, dark-haired, shoulders broad beneath a fitted suit jacket. He swirled his drink idly, but his gaze hadn't shifted. For a moment, heat rose under my skin, traitorous and unexpected. The awareness of being seen, truly seen, was intoxicating after hours of being talked over and shoved aside. When our eyes met, something flickered between us, dangerous and electric. I tore my gaze away before Adrian noticed, but the damage was done. My pulse thudded a beat faster, my breath coming shorter. "So Rachel," Serena's voice snapped me back. "Tell us, are you still? What is it you do again? Marketing? Design? Something small like that." I set my glass down, careful not to let my hand tremble. "We're closing on our European expansion next month. Singapore signed last night." Adrian snorted. "Nobody cares about work talk at dinner." His dismissive wave cut through me sharper than any knife. "We're here for family time." Family. The word tasted poisonous now. Dinner plates arrived, extravagant and gleaming. Wagyu ribeye for Adrian. Lobster for Serena. My salmon, delicate and untouched, cooled beneath the weight of their chatter. They spoke of yachts they didn't own, properties they couldn't afford, vacations borrowed from Instagram. The more they boasted, the clearer it became. This wasn't abundance. This was desperation disguised as decadence. And still, every story angled back toward me, toward what I might provide. By dessert, I felt caged. My mother's nervous laugh, Adrian's smug grin, Serena's constant side glances. They wove a net around me, subtle but suffocating. Then the waiter appeared again, setting a leather-bound check folder gently on the table. The sound was soft, but it cracked like a gunshot in my ears. It didn't land in front of Adrian. It didn't land in front of Serena. It landed in front of me. Adrian raised his glass, his smirk triumphant. "Thanks for dinner, cousin. You don't mind, right? You're doing so well." My mother's hands trembled against her napkin. Serena's smile turned brittle at the edges. Every eye at the table fixed on me. And though I hadn't yet spoken, the answer was already burning at the back of my throat. The waiter's hand lingered on the leather folder, as if he sensed the tension crackling across the table. My cousin Adrian nodded at him like a king dismissing a servant. And the man slipped away, leaving behind silence heavier than stone. The bill rested in front of me like a challenge. No one else reached for it. My mother's eyes darted between me and the folder, her fingers strangling the napkin in her lap. Serena leaned back, her glossed lips curving into something resembling pity, but tasting of poison. Adrian smirked. "Come on, Rachel. You know you're the only one who can handle this." I let the moment stretch, my hand resting lightly on the cover. They exhaled relief too soon, believing I had accepted the role they wrote for me. But instead of opening it, I slid it across the table until it stopped directly in front of Adrian. "I'm not your wallet," I said softly. For a heartbeat, silence. Then his face flushed red. "You can't be serious." Serena's eyes narrowed, her voice pitched in honeyed tones. "We wouldn't have ordered so much if we knew you'd be so petty about it." She gestured to the untouched desserts, the nearly empty bottles of Bordeaux. "Petty?" I raised a brow. "I didn't order any of this. Why would I pay for it?" My mother placed a trembling hand on mine. "Rachel, please. Just this once. Help them out. We're family." There it was again. Family. That word they wielded like a weapon, twisting its meaning until it served only them. I withdrew my hand. Exactly. And family shouldn't manipulate family. Adrian slammed his glass onto the table, sloshing red wine onto the linen. "You make more than all of us combined. What's 2,000 to you? Nothing." The waiter reappeared discreetly, concern flickering in his eyes. "Is everything all right?" Adrian waved him off. "We're fine. She's just being difficult." I met the waiter's gaze and smiled, calm, collected. "Everything's fine. Just a matter of principle." The man nodded and retreated, but not before casting one more curious glance in my direction. Inside, anger boiled, but I forced it into control. Years of being talked over, diminished, erased. Tonight they had orchestrated my humiliation. And now they demanded I pay for it too. "No," I said simply. Serena's smile cracked. "We're drowning here, Rachel. Adrian lost his job 3 months ago. We've been keeping up appearances," but her voice trailed off, eyes shining with crocodile tears. My stomach turned. So that was it. The cars, the vacations, the Rolex. All illusions paid for with credit cards stretched to breaking. And now they expected me to save them. I remembered my science fair ribbon they never attended, my valedictorian speech ignored, the Christmas calls cut short because Adrian's stories mattered more. They had always chosen him. Tonight, they chose me only as a lifeline. The weight of expectation pressed down. My mother leaned closer, whispering, "Please don't let us be humiliated like this. People are watching." I glanced around. Indeed, eyes from neighboring tables flickered our way, some curious, some sympathetic. And from the bar, the stranger's gaze burned like a secret flame. He didn't look away this time. He studied me, assessing, almost approving. That heat spread through me again, shameful and thrilling. To be noticed, not as a resource, not as a bank account, but as a woman holding her ground. Adrian pulled out his wallet with a dramatic flourish, tossing a credit card onto the table. "Fine. If she wants to make a scene, I'll pay." The manager returned with the machine, slid the card through, and paused. "I'm sorry, sir. It's been declined." Adrian's jaw clenched. He produced another. Declined. A third. The same. Serena frantically dug into her designer purse, hands trembling. "Try mine." One swipe later, the manager's polite smile tightened. "I'm afraid this one is also declined." Color drained from their faces. The illusion was crumbling before the entire restaurant. I reached into my purse and pulled out a $10 bill. I set it on the table with precision. "For my coffee," I said, my voice steady. "And a tip for our server." Adrian gaped. Serena sputtered. My mother whispered my name like a prayer and a curse. But I stood, sliding my chair back slowly, deliberately. Adults face the consequences of their choices. Tonight is no different. As I rose, my eyes met his, the man at the bar. His lips curved just slightly, as if to say, finally. Heat coiled low in my stomach, and for one reckless heartbeat, I wanted to walk toward him instead of the exit. But not yet. Tonight was about reclaiming myself. I slung my clutch over my shoulder, and left them to drown in the mess they created. My heels struck the marble, each step ringing like a verdict. Behind me, voices rose, pleading, arguing, breaking. Ahead of me, the night waited, sharp and clean. And though I walked away alone, I had never felt less invisible. The heavy glass door shut behind me, muting the chaos inside Aurelia House. The night air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of rain, and the hum of city traffic below. I breathed it in like freedom, like oxygen after years of suffocation. My heels clicked against the stone terrace as I crossed toward the parking lot. Each step lightened me, as though I were peeling off layers of expectation that had clung to my skin for decades. I almost made it to the edge of the sidewalk before the door banged open again. "Rachel." Adrian's voice sliced through the night, jagged and furious. His footsteps pounded after me. "Don't you dare walk away." I didn't turn. "Not yet. You're not part of this family anymore," he shouted, the words echoing across the parked cars. 5 years ago, those words would have broken me. Tonight, they only stiffened my spine. I slowed, pivoting on my heel. Under the harsh glow of fluorescent lights, Adrian looked less like a golden boy and more like a desperate man unraveling. His collar was damp with sweat, his expression mottled red. Serena clattered after him, her stilettos struggling to keep pace, her diamond bracelet slipping loose as she tried to adjust it with shaky fingers. "You ungrateful little." Adrian bit the word off, chest heaving. He glanced at the diners who had followed us with curious eyes, their murmurs floating in the air like smoke. His rage wasn't as satisfying when it had an audience. I kept my voice level, calm, cutting through his bluster. "All I wanted was a normal family dinner. You turned it into a spectacle." Serena's face crumpled into tears, mascara tracing perfect black rivers down her cheeks. "We wouldn't have asked if it wasn't serious," she sobbed. "You don't understand what we've been through." Adrian's expression shifted from fury to calculation. His voice dropped urgent. "Mom has medical bills. Tests she can't afford. That's why we invited you. We had no choice." I turned toward my mother, who had finally emerged from the doorway, framed by the restaurant's warm light. She looked small, clutching her ruby pendant like a talisman. For a moment, guilt flickered in my chest. "Is that true, Mom?" I asked quietly. Her eyes darted away. "It's just some tests, nothing to worry about. Insurance covers most of it." The betrayal stung sharper than Adrian's shouting ever could. She'd let herself become part of their scheme. My mother, the woman who once told me honesty was the only thing that mattered, had lied to me tonight. I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only she could hear. "If you need real help, we can talk privately. But don't use me as bait in one of Adrian's games." She swallowed, her hands trembling against the pendant. "Rachel, please." Behind her, Serena hissed, "We're all family here. Family helps family." I turned, my eyes locking with hers. Supporting family isn't the same as enabling lies. Learn the difference. Adrian shoved his hands into his pockets, pulling out his phone. "Fine. Call it what you want. But don't come running back when you realize you're alone." Alone. The word almost made me laugh. Images flared in my mind. My business partner Diane staying up until 3 a.m. to polish our first pitch deck, Miguel bringing me soup when I worked through a fever, Sarah from legal giving up her cushy job to take a chance on my vision. My chosen family. The people who had built something with me. Who never once asked for more than respect and honesty. I wasn't alone. I had never been less alone. A flash of movement caught my eye. The man from the bar had left his stool. He leaned casually against the edge of the valet stand now, arms crossed, watching the drama unfold with a cool detachment that only made him more magnetic. For a heartbeat, our eyes met again. Heat stirred low in my stomach, a dangerous thrill running along my nerves. His gaze wasn't pitying or judgmental. It was curious, almost appreciative, as though he'd been waiting to see how I would handle myself. I forced myself to break the connection, to return my attention to the mess in front of me. But the awareness of him lingered, humming beneath my skin like static electricity. Adrian stepped closer, his voice a harsh whisper now. You're making a mistake. We need you. Without you. He trailed off, unwilling to finish the thought aloud. I let the silence hang, then said, if you ever want my help, ask for it with honesty, not with manipulation. Until then, figure out your own bill. I pulled a business card from my clutch and held it out to Mom. Call me tomorrow. Just you. No games. She took it with trembling fingers, her eyes glossy in the streetlight. Adrian glared at the card as if it were a weapon aimed at him. Serena sniffled dramatically, clutching his arm like a damsel in distress. I turned away, heels clicking against the pavement. My car waited just 20 steps ahead. Behind me, Adrian's voice rose again, but I didn't slow. You think you're better than us now? I paused, just long enough to glance over my shoulder. No. Just different. The simple truth dropped between us like a stone into still water. Adrian's mouth opened, then shut again. Serena's tears faltered. My mother's grip on the card tightened. I walked on, each step carrying me farther from their chaos, closer to something cleaner, sharper, freer. And though the city buzzed around me, I could still feel the weight of that stranger's eyes, steady, deliberate, reminding me that not all attention wounds. Some attention lingers, tempting, dangerous. Tonight wasn't over. Not yet. The night air felt sharper the farther I walked from Belmont's. Each breath cut into my chest like glass, but it also cleansed me. My heels clicked against asphalt, steady and deliberate, my pulse slowly finding its rhythm again. I thought I'd be trembling after that confrontation. Instead, I felt lighter. I unlocked my car with a press of the fob, the headlights flashing briefly. For the first time all evening, I smiled, small, private, unshakable. Lucas's shouting still rang behind me, but it no longer reached me. His anger couldn't touch me anymore. Rachel. The voice was different. Low even. Not Lucas. I turned. There he was. The man from the bar, no longer leaning casually with his drink, but standing in the half-light of the parking lot. Closer now. His suit jacket fit like it was tailored for him. Shoulders broad, tie loosened just enough to suggest he lived outside of rules when it pleased him. For a heartbeat, I couldn't move. His presence carried the weight of inevitability, as if he had been waiting for exactly this moment. You handled yourself well in there, he said, his voice carrying the kind of calm authority that made people listen without realizing why. I exhaled, finally, my breath clouding in the night air. You've been watching me all evening. He didn't deny it. His lips curved slightly. Hard not to. Heat flushed my skin, a betrayal I couldn't control. I wanted to demand why, what his interest was, but another part of me, reckless and raw, didn't want to break the spell by asking too soon. Behind us, the restaurant door slammed open again. Lucas's voice echoed across the lot, brittle with rage. You think you're better than us? I almost laughed. He was still shouting the same line, as if repeating it might make it true. But this time, when I glanced back, I saw not just Lucas and Brittany, but a small crowd of onlookers lingering under the glow of the chandeliers. Diners watching, waiting, savoring the spectacle. The stranger's gaze flicked toward them, then back to me. Do you want me to walk you to your car? For once, the question wasn't controlling or patronizing. It was an offer. A choice. Yes, I said before I could second-guess myself. We walked side by side, the the tension of unspoken things weaving between us. Every step closer to my car, every brush of air between us, sparked awareness in my body I hadn't felt in years. He didn't crowd me, didn't reach for me. Yet I felt him in every nerve ending, as if the night itself had tilted to make room for the two of us. At my car, I turned to him. The glow from a nearby streetlight cast shadows across his face, sharpening the line of his jaw, illuminating the intensity of his eyes. "Thank you," I said quietly. "For what?" "For seeing me." The words slipped out before I could catch them. Something shifted in his expression. Not surprise, but recognition. Like he understood too well what it was to feel unseen. "I should let you go," he said finally, though his tone held no conviction. I nodded, but neither of us moved. My hand hovered near the door handle, my body caught between flight and a desire to stay exactly where I was. Then, from across the lot, Lucas's angry voice cut through again. "We'll remember this, Rachel. Don't come back crawling when you've got no one left." I didn't turn. Didn't even flinch. Instead, I looked only at the stranger, my lips curving into a small smile. "That's the difference," I murmured. "I already have people who matter. Just not them." His eyes searched mine, and for the briefest instant, I wondered if he might lean closer, if the tension strung between us would snap into something neither of us could undo. But he stepped back instead, his restraint both disappointing and intriguing. "Drive safe, Rachel." I froze at the sound of my name. I hadn't told him. "How do you?" He only smiled, enigmatic, before turning toward the shadows of the lot. I sat in my car, heart pounding, watching his figure disappear into the night. My phone buzzed in my clutch, but I didn't reach for it. Not Lucas. Not my mother. Not anyone from that table. Tonight was mine. And for the first time in years, the future didn't feel like something to fear. It felt like something waiting. The city swallowed me whole after I left Belmont's. Towers of glass glittered with late-night offices. Headlights blurred into ribbons of white and red across the freeway. And somewhere in all that noise I tried to steady my breath. My hands gripped the wheel tighter than they needed to. Every echo of Lucas's voice still scratched at the back of my mind. But the memory of the stranger's calm baritone settled over it like balm. He knew my name. That detail wouldn't leave me alone. I hadn't told him. Nobody inside the restaurant had either. The thought chased me all the way home, tangling with my pulse until it beat questions into my skull. When I pushed open the door to my loft, the familiar scent of cedar and fresh paint should have comforted me. Instead, the space felt restless, as if it too waited for an answer. I set my clutch down on the counter, slid out of my heels, and poured a glass of wine I barely touched. Sleep never came. By morning, the Belmont confrontation was all over town. Diane texted first. "Saw the Harrington Circus at Belmont's. You okay?" Miguel followed with, "Twitter says your cousin tried to pawn jewelry for the bill." "Damn." Sarah simply wrote, "Proud of you." They were my chosen family, steady as bedrock. Still, beneath their support, one question kept throbbing. Who was he? I didn't even know his name, yet I could still feel the weight of his gaze on me. The way it had stripped me bare and left me standing taller instead of smaller. 3 days later, I got my answer. Belmont's called. Not the restaurant itself, but the hotel attached to it. The director of events asking if my company would consider a bid for their rebranding project. "Your name came up in conversation," the woman said. "A Mr. Hawthorne recommended you." Hawthorne. The word fizzed through me like champagne bubbles. He hadn't just seen me. He had dropped my name into rooms that mattered. That evening, I found myself back at Belmont's, not inside the gilded dining room this time, but across the street at the quieter wine bar where deals were whispered instead of flaunted. I told myself it was reconnaissance, not obsession. Yet when the door swung open and he walked in, every nerve ending in me lit up like flint striking steel. Same tailored suit. Same unhurried stride. Same eyes that looked straight through facades. He didn't head for the bar. He headed for me. "I hoped I'd see you here," he said. My throat tightened. "Then you're better at hoping than I am at pretending." His smile was small, almost secretive. He slid into the seat across from me, as if it had always been his place. The air between us charged instantly, awareness humming just beneath the surface. "Why did you tell them about me?" I asked. Because good work deserves to be seen, he replied simply. Then leaning forward, his voice dropped lower. And because I wanted an excuse to see you again. The honesty hit harder than any line of flattery ever could. My breath caught, my skin heated. For the first time in years, someone's attention didn't feel like scrutiny or extraction. It felt like recognition. The waiter appeared, asking if we wanted wine. I ordered a bold Cabernet just to steady my hands. Hawthorne, he hadn't offered a first name yet, watched me with an intensity that made me acutely aware of every movement. The lift of my glass, the curve of my wrist, the pulse flickering just beneath my skin. You carry yourself differently than them, he said at last. Like you've already decided you don't need their approval. I gave a half smile. Last week, I would have called that a lie. Tonight I think it might finally be true. His eyes didn't leave mine. The silence between us wasn't empty. It brimmed with something unspoken, something dangerously close to desire. When we finally parted that night, the city air felt warmer, my chest lighter. He hadn't kissed me, hadn't even touched me beyond a handshake that lingered just a beat too long. Yet my body hummed as if he had pressed his mouth against my skin. As if restraint itself was the most intoxicating act. As I walked home, his name echoed in my mind. Hawthorne. A name heavy with promise, threaded with mystery. And for the first time since Belmont's, the thought of my family didn't sting. It barely registered at all. Because something else, someone else, was beginning. 3 days after meeting Hawthorne at the wine bar, his name still lingered like a secret at the back of my throat. I caught myself whispering it aloud once, just to test the way it felt on my tongue. Solid, distinguished. A name that belonged to a man who seemed to see me more clearly than my own family ever had. I should have buried the memory. Instead, I found myself walking toward the old library district on a Thursday evening, drawn by an email invitation sent through a professional network. Hawthorne Consulting, private lecture on legacy branding. It felt half business, half test. When I stepped into the lecture hall, I knew instantly he'd seen me the moment I walked in. His gaze found mine across rows of polished oak seats, anchoring me in place before I could fade into anonymity. He didn't smile, didn't acknowledge me beyond that steady look, but my body reacted as if he'd brushed his hand across my bare skin. I sat, notebook in hand, pretending I was there purely for work. But the truth was undeniable. I wanted to understand the man who had spoken my name without being told. The lecture itself was sharp, insightful. He spoke about legacy as if it were a living thing, about the danger of inheriting someone else's version of success without questioning whether it fits. My pen moved across the page, but my focus kept drifting to the line of his jaw, the way his hands punctuated ideas with restrained certainty. When it ended, people surged forward with questions. I stayed seated, heart hammering. I told myself to leave quietly, slip back into my life, but then his voice cut through the noise. Rachel. Heads turned. My cheeks burned, but I stood, legs moving me toward him without consent. You came, he said simply, as if that fact alone carried weight. I thought it might be useful, I answered, clutching my notebook. Professionally. The corner of his mouth lifted. Of course. We stepped out into the evening air together, the city alive with flickering street lamps and the murmur of late-night cafes. The professional distance between us was paper-thin, ready to tear at the slightest movement. Why me? I asked finally, unable to hold the question any longer. Why notice me at Belmont's of all places? He walked slowly, his gaze steady on the pavement ahead. Because you looked like someone who'd stopped asking for permission. That's rare. A shiver moved through me. Not fear, something closer to recognition. At a corner cafe, he gestured toward a table by the window. I hesitated, then sat. The warmth of the place wrapped around us, low jazz drifting from a speaker overhead. He didn't ask about my family. He didn't probe for the drama I carried like invisible luggage. Instead, he asked about my work. What drove me, what I wanted next, what success looked like when it wasn't defined by anyone else. Nobody had ever asked me those things without a hidden agenda. My answers tumbled out before I could stop them. At one point, his hand brushed mine as he reached for his glass. The contact was brief, accidental, but it sparked something low and dangerous in my body. I pulled back slightly, pulse racing. There are lines we don't cross, I murmured, though I wasn't sure if I was reminding him or myself. Lines, he said softly, can also be boundaries we redraw when we're ready. The air between us thickened. When I finally rose to leave, he didn't press me to stay. He simply stood steady, his presence filling the narrow space of the cafe like gravity itself. Thank you for tonight, I said, though it felt inadequate. Rachel. He paused as if weighing the risk of more. Be careful. When people realize you've stopped playing their game, they often try harder to pull you back in. I knew he meant my family, but as I stepped into the night air, skin still tingling where his fingers had grazed mine, I wondered if he also meant himself. The hum of the city had become background noise, but the silence of my phone was deafening. After Belmont's, after walking away from Lucas and Brittany in that parking lot, I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd leave me alone. They didn't. The first call came 2 weeks later. My mother. Her voice trembled on the voicemail. Rachel, please. Lucas has been under stress. Brittany isn't well. Can't you just talk to them? The second came from a blocked number. Lucas, slurring through his words, blaming me for his job slipping away. You embarrassed me, you embarrassed Mom. Don't act like you're better. I deleted it halfway through, but the venom lingered. By the third call, I stopped answering altogether. At the office, life pulsed with a different rhythm. Diane cracked jokes over bagels, Miguel argued about fonts, and Sarah kept us grounded with her unflappable calm. We'd landed the Singapore account, then Tokyo. My days blurred into presentations and late-night laughter, the kind of exhaustion that felt alive, not draining. But sometimes, when the conference room emptied and my reflection stared back from the darkened glass, I thought of Hawthorne. His steady eyes, his way of saying more with silence than others said with paragraphs. So when his name appeared in my inbox, Mr. Hawthorne requests your presence at a client dinner, my pulse skipped. The dinner was at an old-world steakhouse, all wood-paneled walls and amber light. The kind of place Lucas would have bragged about affording. I almost turned back at the door, nerves prickling, but then I saw him. Come. Certain. Waiting for me as though my arrival had been the missing note in a song. Rachel, he said simply, and the room steadied. Over oysters and wine, we spoke of contracts, travel, legacy, themes that should have been sterile but weren't. His gaze held mine too long when I described breaking free of my family's grip. He didn't pity me, he respected me. That distinction lit something sharp and electric in my chest. At one point, our hands brushed as we both reached for the wine list. My skin burned at the contact. I pulled back first, but the weight of that almost touch lingered the rest of the night. Careful, he murmured later as we stood at the coat check. Of what? I asked, breath unsteady. Of confusing battles worth fighting with ones that only drag you back into the mud. It was advice. It was warning. It was intimate. The next morning, my phone rang again. This time it wasn't Lucas. It was my mother. I know you don't want to hear from me, she began, her voice thinner than I remembered. But your cousin is hosting a family brunch this weekend. Please come. For me. I almost laughed. The audacity of calling it a family brunch when their definition of family had excluded me so many times. But her voice carried something unfamiliar. Not demand. Not manipulation. Something closer to fear. I didn't answer her right away. Instead, I closed my eyes and pictured Hawthorne's gaze across candlelight. His warning, careful. And I wondered, did stepping into that brunch mean falling back into the mud? Or finally walking into the room as someone too strong to be buried there again? I told myself not to go. I told myself my mother's voice on the phone was just another manipulation. A softer version of Lucas's shouts. But by Sunday morning, there I was, pulling into the narrow street lined with manicured hedges and imported cars. The brunch was at my aunt's house. A sprawling brick colonial with white shutters that always smelled faintly of old money and desperation. I killed the engine and sat for a moment, staring at the house I'd once run through as a child. It looked smaller now, as if adulthood had shrunk its grandeur down to scale. When I finally stepped out, my heels clicked on the stone walkway like a countdown. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of cinnamon rolls and polished wood. My mother spotted me first. Relief washed across her face, though it quickly reshaped itself into composure. "Rachel," she said, moving to kiss my cheek. Her eyes darted nervously toward the dining room, where voices rose and fell in choreographed laughter. I followed her gaze. Lucas was at the head of the table, Brittany perched beside him like a jeweled accessory. His arm moved animatedly as he described something to my uncle, his watch flashing under the chandelier. I should have walked out then. But instead, I squared my shoulders and stepped inside. The chatter dimmed when I entered. Forks paused. Heads tilted. Lucas's smirk returned instantly, the same one from Belmont's. "Look who decided to show up," he said, raising his mimosa in mock salute. Brittany's smile was all teeth. "Rachel, darling, so glad you could join us. We were just talking about our summer in Santorini. You've been, haven't you?" "No," I said simply, sliding into a chair near the end of the table. "I've been working." The silence that followed was sharper than any insult. My mother busied herself with the bread basket. My aunt offered me coffee like a peace treaty. The meal moved forward, every bite of quiche or sip of champagne laced with subtext. Lucas bragged about investments he didn't understand. Brittany sprinkled in stories about exclusive invites that sounded suspiciously generic. When my uncle asked about my company's expansion, Lucas cut in before I could answer. "She's always exaggerating. Small startups sound bigger than they are." This time, I didn't let it slide. "Funny," I said, setting down my fork. "Because Forbes just called us one of the fastest growing firms on the West Coast. But I'm sure your expertise in failure qualifies you to correct me." The table froze. My mother's hand trembled against her napkin. Lucas's jaw tightened, a vein in his temple pulsing. I thought he'd explode, but instead he leaned back, eyes glittering. "Still bitter about Belmont's? You embarrassed yourself, Rachel. Not us." I laughed, quiet, sharp. "I didn't embarrass myself. I refused to bankroll your theater of lies. There's a difference." Brittany's voice rose, brittle as glass. "We wouldn't have ordered so much if we'd known you'd be so cold." "Cold?" I echoed, sipping my coffee. "Or unwilling to be conned?" Across the table, my aunt cleared her throat. "Maybe this isn't the place." But Lucas slammed his hand down, rattling silverware. "You think you're above us, don't you?" I met his glare evenly. "No. Just different." The words echoed, the same ones I'd left him with in the parking lot weeks ago. That was when my phone buzzed. Normally I would have ignored it, but instinct made me glance down. A single line from an unknown number. "Careful. They're cornering you." My chest tightened. "Hawthorne." I slipped the phone face down on the table, pulse quickening. How did he know I was here? More importantly, why did it comfort me? The confrontation fizzled after that, though not for lack of trying on Lucas's part. My uncle changed the subject to politics. My aunt asked Brittany about her Pilates studio, and my mother sat in silence, twisting her pendant until the chain left red marks on her skin. When plates were cleared and coffee cooled, I stood. "Thank you for brunch," I said, my voice level. "But this isn't family. Not anymore." My mother's eyes widened, but she didn't stop me. Lucas muttered something about betrayal under his breath, but I didn't pause. I walked out into the sunlight, the cool air hitting my skin like clarity. In the driveway, a familiar black car idled at the curb. My breath caught as the window lowered and Hawthorne's eyes met mine. Calm. Steady. Unreadable. "Get in," he said. Not a command, an invitation. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was running from something. I felt like I might finally be running toward it. The leather seat was cool against the back of my thighs as I slid into Hawthorne's car. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at the quiet hum of the dashboard lights, listening to the muffled sound of my family still arguing inside my aunt's house. Their voices were faint, but I knew the pattern: accusations, excuses, the frantic scramble to assign blame to anyone but themselves. He pulled away without asking where I wanted to go. The city blurred past the window, street lamps streaking into golden ribbons. Only when we were far enough from the neighborhood's manicured hedges and ornamental gates did he speak. "You didn't have to go in there," he said. "I know," I admitted. "But I needed to. One last time." His eyes flicked toward me, unreadable in the glow of the dashboard. "Closure," he said, though the word felt too neat for the storm I'd just walked through. We ended up at a late-night diner off the highway, the kind with neon buzzing and half-broken letters, and the smell of burnt coffee hanging in the air. The waitress didn't recognize him, didn't care about appearances, and that was the point. We slid into a booth by the window. I wrapped my hands around the chipped mug of coffee she brought me, grateful for its heat. "You look different when you walked out," he said finally, his gaze steady. "Different. Like you'd finally stopped negotiating with ghosts." The words lodged somewhere deep inside me. For years I'd bargained with them, for approval, for scraps of respect, for the illusion of belonging. Tonight I hadn't. Tonight I'd walked out with nothing but my own spine intact. And it felt terrifying. And liberating. We talked until the diner grew quiet around us, until the other booths emptied and the waitress leaned on the counter reading a paperback. Hawthorne never pushed, never demanded. He simply listened. At one point, our knees brushed beneath the table. I didn't move mine away. Neither did he. "Rachel," he said softly. "What do you want? Not from them. Not from me. From yourself." The question stole my breath. No one had asked me that before without strings attached. I stared into my coffee, then out the window where dawn was beginning to soften the edge of the night. "I want a life where I'm not defined by what they withhold," I said. "I want to choose my family instead of being trapped by the one I was born into." And my throat tightened, but I forced the words out. "And I want to stop being afraid of wanting more. Of wanting someone." The silence that followed was heavier than any argument I'd ever had with Lucas or my mother. It wasn't empty. It was full of possibility. He reached across the table, his hand warm when it closed over mine. No theatrics. No speeches. Just steady presence. "You already are more," he said. For a moment, the diner, the city, even the echo of my family's chaos disappeared. It was just us, two people who had learned to build armor, daring to imagine setting it down. The weeks that followed blurred into motion. Work victories, late-night strategy calls with my team. Hawthorne's quiet appearances that steadied me more than I wanted to admit. My mother called twice, then stopped. Lucas sent one furious message, then nothing. The silence from them was almost louder than their demands had ever been, but I didn't break it. Not this time. Instead, I poured myself into the people who had earned me. Diane with her relentless humor, Miguel with his stubborn optimism, Sarah with her quiet wisdom. My chosen family. And slowly, I realized that Hawthorne wasn't an intruder in that circle. He was part of it, on his terms and on mine. 3 months after the brunch, I stood again outside Belmont's, the restaurant where it had all begun. This time, I wasn't there to beg for a seat. I was there for a business dinner, my company's logo embossed on the event program. When I walked through those heavy glass doors, the maitre d' greeted me by name. For the first time, the view of the skyline felt like it belonged to me too. Later that night, as Hawthorne drove me home, he glanced over with that calm certainty of his. "So," he said, "was it worth it? Walking back into their world just to prove you didn't need it?" I thought of the empty chair at my aunt's brunch table, of the $2,200 bill sliding across linen, of my mother's trembling hands clutching her napkin, of Lucas's face when I refused. I thought of the woman reflected in Belmont's mirror, steady-eyed and unbroken. "Yes," I said, "because I didn't walk back in for them. I walked back in for me." He smiled then, the kind of smile that wasn't about victory or conquest but recognition. And for the first time in years, I let myself smile back without apology. The past would always exist, its wounds, its betrayals, its endless chorus of not enough. But it no longer defined me. Ahead of me stretched a road I'd chosen myself, one lit not by their approval, but by my own resolve. And maybe, just maybe, by the steady light of someone who had seen me clearly all along.